All right, welcome back. Sorry about the little hiatus there. Got a little bit behind. Some other things kind of got in the way, but we're back on track, letter 18. And we're going to start with a hot topic. In letter 18, Screwtape talks about the aims of sexuality. The aims of, our being made in the image and likeness of God, being made in a way that is meant to be a gift to another. And this is true not only spiritually, but it's also true physically. We're made as, sexual beings. And God, He demands something of us with regards to that sexuality. That we should either be a gift to, one other in what Screwtape calls an unmitigated monogamy. We would just call it marriage. Or that we would, give that gift of sexuality completely to God, to give it completely back to Him, which would be complete abstinence. And because God demands this of us from our sexuality, the demons are going to attack both of these things, right? The demons are going to, either attack the possibility of abstinence by rendering it, impossible, by making us think that it's not even possible to give ourselves that way, that it's impossible to give of our sexuality just to God and not to another. Or the demon is going to attack, the foundation of what that unmitigated monogamy truly is. The demon will try to make us think that it's not really built on the foundation that God has given it, but rather tries to give us a different foundation, which would be a false foundation, which would never be able to hold it up. That false foundation that the demons want to, ground marriage in is a feeling of being in love. And this feeling of being in love is something that is quite, short-lived. It's something that comes and goes. It's something that you might easily feel, attracted towards many different people, not just one. And so because it's such a shaky foundation, the demons can, quickly rid us of being able to really understand and see the full fruits and see the full solidity that marriage could provide if it's actually founded on, the right foundation rather than the wrong. Now, Screwtape kind of goes into, why the demons can't ultimately ever really think through or understand the design or the order that God has given, whether it's to, our sexuality or to anything else. It's because they're working from a different philosophy. You see, the philosophy of God rests on what to the demons is an apparent contradiction. It is an impossibility. That things are actually made to benefit from one another. That someone else's good is actually my good as well. That when one person does well, I'm doing well. That when another person suffers, that, I then also suffer. That we actually share, right, in the same goal or the same aim, which ultimately is in a cooperative body of love. That's ultimately the aim or the end of all things, is to be in this, communion of love. Ultimately, we see that in the very person of God. And Screwtape even mentions this, that God would even claim that He Himself is, that end, being a community of persons with the same essence, the essence of love, right? And that's what we believe of God. And yet to a demon, that type of end seems to them just impossible, because to them, things don't share goods. Things are either yours or mine, and we can't both benefit from one thing or another. That to a demon, if someone stands to gain, another one stands to lose. And so therefore, to be isn't about, love and cooperation. But to be for them is, in the words of Screwtape, to be in competition with another. And so their aim, their goal is to try to absorb others into themselves so that they themselves have that good. They're trying to, destroy by gaining themselves. Rather than God, obviously, He created all things not to be destroyed, and not to be the same, but to be different, and for all of them to mutually benefit by one another's good, by one another's glory. And when it comes to our sexuality, that really is the aim. The aim of our sexuality is to lead us to a place of cooperation and love. That's why the purpose of the sexual act, so to speak, is more for us than it is for the animals. For animals, it's just about reproduction and procreation. It's just about offspring. And yet for us, it's not just about children, but it's also about an affection and a mutual relationship, a mutual friendship that might be able to support that unity, that communion of love that becomes the very basis of the family. And the family really is for God's order, for God's creation, with respect to our sexuality. It's the crown. It's what our sexuality leads us to. It leads us to founding a family. That's the goal of sex. The end of sex really is a family. And yet for the demon, they want to, disassociate that end from its beginning. They want to make sex not about marriage, not about the family, but they want to make sex about something else. Because if they can make it about something else, then they can use it as a tool or as a means to actually bring us greater frustration and demise, And C.S. Lewis, he even says that, it's very clear to God that the foundation of marriage is sex. Because indeed, when he went to describe what is marriage, he talks about it in terms of two becoming one flesh. Two fleshes becoming one flesh. He points right to it. And yet a demon wants to disassociate sex from marriage. And the demon would say that marriage isn't about sex. That marriage is about, being in love. It's about having this feeling of being happy together. And that is what marriage is really founded on. Of course, they do that because when that feeling erodes or gets old or goes through the normal ebbs and flows of life, then the whole structure of what marriage is, the whole structure of what family is, becomes a little bit shaky because now it's not founded on something, concrete and fundamental. It's founded on something that is quite in flux, for a lack of better terms. C.S. Lewis says that sexual relations or our sexuality is something that is meant to establish a transcendental bond. It's something that happens each and every time two people participate in that. There is a bond that transcends them, that is established, and that bond is something that will be there forever. It will either be eternally enjoyed in marriage as those two become one, or it's something that will be eternally endured, something that you'll just kind of have to live with, so to speak. In the case of people maybe sleeping around, it's not that those bonds don't exist, that the bond of marriage, so to speak, that transcendental bond of friendship, of communion, only exists when, two people are actually in love. That's not true. It's actually something that's very physical, something that's very concrete, and it will, be eternally endured. It will be something that we'll just have to live with, that brokenness within us. And so I think letter 18, it really is C.S. Lewis's way of trying to highlight for us the true foundations of marriage. That the true foundations of marriage really is in fertility or sexuality, as well as fidelity and goodwill, in terms of actually allowing our sexuality and the sexual act to create that transcendental bond that might lead us to a life of fidelity and goodwill with another. And that the whole question of being in love or feeling in love isn't really what determines, whether or not you're married or whether or not you're good to be married. At the very end of this letter, Screwtape, he talks about two different scenarios that are to, well, the demon's advantage. It's the scenario of a hopeless lover, so one who struggles with chastity, who struggles, with their sexuality, and so they're frustrated because they feel like they're certainly meant for marriage, and yet they just haven't fallen in love yet. And to C.S. Lewis's mind, it's like, well, your foundation isn't being in love or feeling in love. That's not the start of a relationship. That really should be, well, the end of the relationship. That really should be the fruit of the relationship. You shouldn't strive for the fruit, or you shouldn't think that the fruit is going to be there right away. That to truly be in love, to truly have those feelings, you have to work for it, so to speak. And so there's that unfortunate circumstance where people feel like they're hopeless in their love lives because they haven't yet felt being in love, but they're looking for it in the wrong side of the relationship. The other scenario that is, well, to the advantage of the demon is the infatuated lover, one who conflates any infatuation with being in love, and therefore anytime they feel those feelings, it permits them to do anything. It permits them to, well, even give of their sexuality to another, which obviously destroys the whole point or the whole plan of our sexuality, which is meant to lead us to, well, that one faithful, sure relationship in marriage that supports a family. And so we shouldn't also just be that infatuated lover that thinks, well, every time we have those feelings, that's a sign that we should maybe apply our sexuality there. So that's the letter 18 as far as what I got out of it. We'll move on now to letter 19, and hopefully I'll get back on track as far as where we're supposed to be.